Well, there's no problem. If you had a gun, shoot him in the head.
Welcome to Shoot Me Straight podcast. I'm here with David and Angelique. They have their own podcast. It is called Turned On.
That's right. That's right.
They're becoming really good friends for me and my wife. We got to meet them in Seaside yesterday, and I wanted to bring them on and talk to them about their podcast, what they're doing. I really, more than anything, want to get some experience from them because these guys are on like almost 200 episodes.
Yep.
And we don't have, we're on episode 5 or something like that, still trying to figure out what we're doing. And these guys have been through a lot. One of the things that they were telling me, and I'll ask it as a question really, is about when you guys got started. What was that like when the first couple episodes, like you guys coming up with the idea of it?
Yeah.
All that.
So, it's funny because when we first got married, Angelique's like, so what do you want to, we fell in love and we're kind of talking and she's like, so what do you want to do? And I'm like, I'm a storyteller. I want to be a storyteller. And she's like, okay.
Great,
and,
we're going to be broke.
Yeah. And she didn't tell me that right away, but later on, years into the marriage, she's like, when you told me you wanted to be a storyteller, I'm like, so we're going to be broke.
Yeah, I was sweating.
So, we got our podcast started. I'll give you the backstory later on, but I'll tell you the short story up front is Angelique says, I want to do a podcast. And I said, well, babe, I think we're better together, and let's play off one another. And there wasn't a lot of couples doing a podcast together at the time. And so she goes, well, what do you want to call it? And I go, let's call it Turned On. And she's like, well, what's that about? I'm like, I was teaching entrepreneurs how to articulate their vision in a way that wasn't boring. I have a very short attention span. And I was watching people are kind of in their car trying to articulate their vision for their product or their business. And I was just like, hey, how are you? I'm just sitting here. I just finished lunch. I had a tuna fish sandwich.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. I'm going to wait for some people to pop on. And for me, with a short attention span, I'm like, get to the point. Like, what's in it for me? Like, give me the juice. Yep. And so I was teaching this course at the time. And in my workbook, I had this photograph of a food court. And it had like 10, I would say early 20s, late teen people, young people in it, in line at a food court. And out of those 10 people in this line, 9 of them were looking down at their phones. And one person was just up and alert and, looking straight ahead. And I would ask the audience, I'm like, who here, if you were going to do business, who here looks like they're up for the conversation? Who here looks like they're ready? And who's turned on? And I labeled that little section Turned On. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of like, who is like the switch? Who's ready to flip that switch? Who's open for the relationship? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, let's call it Turned On. And lo and behold, what happened?
Well, there's that side of the story, right? And then there's my side of the story.
Well, the URL was available.
The URL was available, by the way, turnedon.com, which it was a premium, obviously. And most people go into that site might be looking for one thing and they're going to find something else. That's another way to flip the switch in their life. But, for me, my background in business was so much of wanting to mince the worlds of, being a kingdom entrepreneur and being focused on like the God mind and bringing that into the business conversation. So I was like, well, Turned On to me is like, you're making sure that light is that never goes out, that you pierce through the darkness, that you see differently, that you speak differently, that you walk differently. And so the same goes with what he was saying. He's like, if your head's up, your eyes are open, you see differently, you hear differently, you speak differently, you come across differently, you connect differently, you walk differently. So that was where we got to bring us together. So we decided if we're going to do this, we're going to go all in. And it started with saying, okay, well, if we're going to brand it, Turned On is the URL available. And to our surprise, it was like, what are the odds that in 2019 or 2020 when we did that, the URL turnedon.com was available? It was just like,
.com.
The .com.
Wow.
Not a .me, not a .u, not a .org, like a .com. So we bought the .com. We started the podcast. He actually wrote his first book, Turned On. And we decided that this was going to be how we approach everything, how we look at business, how we do life, and how we approach every single relationship. So for us, it was a statement. It was putting our stake in the ground, and it's a hill we're willing to die on.
Well, let me ask you a question, David. How do we learn most often? I learn and people teach through stories. I mean, if you open the Bible, it is a book of stories, parables, metaphors, right? And so turned on was this kind of metaphor, like a Matthew 5:14, you're the light of the world. More importantly, what was the opposite of that is I started using the term we're a society, we're a culture on cruise control. We have hit the cruise control button. We go through life not even looking up. We are not engaging people. We're not looking them in the eye. And when you go on cruise control, and sometimes people don't even realize it, you can stay in your house now for months and not even have to leave because you got everything delivered to you. And so we wanted to wake people up and say, hey, we're slowly being put to sleep. C.S. Lewis said that the safest road to hell is the gradual one. And Jordan Peterson kind of reiterated that recently on an episode of the Joe Rogan podcast. He said what happens is people get pushed back and they say, hey, wait a minute. And then they stop. And then they wait and they start to push a little more. And then we push back and say, wait, this isn't right. And then they stop. And then he goes, before you know it, you're at a place so far, you don't know how you got there. And what they did is they did it little by little by little. So if Jordan Peterson's saying that now, one of the brightest minds of our times, and C.S. Lewis said that in the 1960s, right? The safest road to hell is the gradual one. We need to wake people up, because if not, we'll just watch TV all day. We'll be on our phones all day. We'll have our food delivered to us. And before you know it, you'll be like, my life is terrible. How? Well, it's because you went to sleep years ago. It's because you went on cruise control. You went on autopilot, and little by little by little, you realize that you shut people out of your life. We met you outdoors. We met you in person. And the pandemic just exasperated this whole thing. So I feel like God was saying, hey, get ready for this. I started this in 2016. We started our podcast in what year?
2019.
2019.
Yeah.
So God was prepping us for this to say, hey, this is going to be a major problem in life.
100%. Jordan was probably talking about politics, right? Like going
The
left,
wokeness
left.
and people pushing, and then us saying, okay, that's a little too much, and then they would stop, and you're okay with that.
But I agree with you. The same thing is true. Like this year, the way I put it to myself this year with my wife was, hey, I'm not going to let a day go by that I'm not leveling up, that I'm not not being turned on, not turned off, in your words. But it's this. The default position will be to cruise, to
sedate,
watch a TV show, to I know I need to do that tomorrow type deal, instead of hey,
do it now.
Yeah, and it's a accumulation of a lot of little decisions.
That's right.
Continual little decisions of going, okay, no, this scares me, I'm going to do it.
Yep.
This scares me, I'm going to do it. This, I don't want to do this, but that's the next step. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So there was a
switch. Yeah.
There was a
That's
random
simple.
guy in the book. He was a bishop in Africa, and I was reading his thing, and he was talking about this sermon, and it was titled "The Devil's in the Delay," and he's like, the devil is in the delay. He's like, because he can't take what's in your heart, your passion. He can't take that from you. He can't steal you, but he can delay you. He can put things in front of you to distract you. And when you're delayed long enough, guess what? You stop. You know, how many people have something like you wanted to do something, you had a vision, and you just told us before we went on air, you just said, I told my wife that I have to stop and do this now, and I have to go all in. So that's unique, because a lot of people are going the opposite way. Well, I want to start this, 501c3, or I want to start my own company, or I have a vision just to get in shape, or have a vision to really spend time with my kids. And then we get delayed, and then we get delayed, and then we get distracted. And then before you know it, you're past your prime. You're in maybe your 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever it may be, and you look back, and the worst thing that could happen is regret. I've had grown men take my class, 6'10" men, strong men, and I said, let's do a little bit of just Q&A here. Let's say you're 95 years old. You lived a great life, and you're on your deathbed, natural causes, and you look back and you say, what's your biggest regret? What would that be? And the guy just started, he just started waterfalls, this big, burly alpha man, waterfalls. He's like, spending time with my kids. He goes, I don't spend enough time with my kids, and I know if I don't change that it'll eat me up inside. Think about that.
Well, we talk about that in Turned On. There's 4 main hallways that we refer to. So it's health, relationships, business, and then of course faith. Because if you ask that question, the majority of the times, most people are going to have a regret in one or more of those areas. We really don't think much else. Those are like the pillars of our guiding principles. It's how it's our health of relationships, our purpose in business, in the marketplace, what we do, how we invest in our talents and put it back into the world, and then of course our faith, our spirituality. So when we look at it as a hallway, it's not a room. You're not in a box. It's a corridor. It takes you from one place to another. It's a journey. It's something that you're always moving through, always growing through, and we want to keep it simple enough to where, like you said, it's these little decisions that accumulate over time. And they're either going to accumulate in a way that is going to give, great favor and produce fruit, or they're going to accumulate into a way where you're going to find yourself really behind the 8 ball. So you're walking down a hallway and you find yourself in a dark spot. You got to realize, I got to flip the switch. It's time to turn on another light. Like I have to move through this season. And to your point, like pivoting, there's so many times in so many people's lives, turned on moments, where they've pivoted in a career because they realized that they were doing something that was soul sucking. It was just destroying them at a spiritual level and pulling away from their very purpose. And that's such an important part of who we are and how we're designed and how he hardwired us for that type of connection, is just to make sure that we're sowing into the talents and not being some, slothful servant of not investing in the things that we have been given. We are all given a measure. How much we invest in it is really where the favor is.
That's awesome.
And think about what she said about hardwired, right? Think about the part God hardwired us. So when we start taking our speech out of it and we're just texting, when we start taking out being in person and we lose, like when you meet somebody, there's a visceral connection with even a smell. Oh. People, well, I don't want to smell, right? But you recognize that's the strongest sense we have. So when you meet somebody in person, you touch them, you shake their hand, maybe you give them a hug, you can smell them, you see them, you hear them. And so what we're doing slowly but surely in this virtual world is we're taking all those things. And when you look at the eyeball in general, and you see, like, that's one of the things that Darwin, even an atheist like Darwin, he just couldn't wrap his mind around the eyeball and all of its moving parts.
Yeah, was it windows to the soul?
Yeah.
Window to the soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you start taking these things, these things that God gave us, these natural things, and you start taking them away, and that's why these lockdowns that happened over the pandemic, and you said, well, people are more depressed, they're not going out, and slowly but surely we're losing that vitality. When we talked about people hunting right before we came on air, and we talked about being outdoors, I've never been one of those people that has really been into some of the I don't know what you call it, but it's grounding basically now. And you realize that no, there's science behind grounding. There's science behind being outdoors.
That's where you go outside with your shoes off.
Yep.
And just
in
like
nature, yeah.
On the earth.
Yeah. And so from a Christian standpoint, I was like, well, okay, but there is science behind that. And part of my second book, which was called The Pursuit, was finding where science and faith meet. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. There's actually a lot more where they meet in the middle. There's Francis Collins. He was in the news recently for whether you like him or not, but he was one of the big things over the pandemic. He was one of the big scientists. Well, Francis Collins wrote a book called The Language of God, and he was the lead scientist on what's known as the greatest scientific discovery of mankind. It's the mapping of the human genome, the DNA sequence, and it happened back in, I believe, 1992, somewhere in the Bill Clinton era. They finished it. In other words, they had been working on this, but it was called. Now we have the DNA sequence. Yeah. They can map out everything. So if you read The Language of God, he actually was an atheist, started out, became agnostic, started to believe, and then became a strong believer. And you'll see the same thing with so many of the strongest believers, like C.S. Lewis, atheist. C.S. Lewis was in the war, World War II, and he saw people dying in front of him in violent ways. His mother had died when he was 9. So his whole worldview was death of his mother, death of some of his closest friends. And he was an atheist, and then he became agnostic, and then he had this conversation in Oxford with one of the other...
Was it Tolkien?
Yeah, and they had this...
They were friends, I knew that.
Yeah, and they had this conversation like 3 o'clock in the morning, and they basically converted C.S. Lewis in this... It was a series of things, but there was this one night that came to it. So I just feel like I feel like there's so much more that if we don't put the brakes on what's happening now, and we don't get back to that human connection, that we're gonna get lost.
One of the things I think of with that is, so y'all mentioned faith, and I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. Not by my choice, honestly. I was heading to death and drug and alcohol addiction, and God blew me up. Right, He came and grabbed a hold of me, and I remember one of the first things I thought that morning was one, holy shit, God is actually real, like actually real.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have said I was a Christian before,
Yeah.
I would have been like, yeah, I am. I don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I did not it's a difference between Googling someone and knowing them, truly knowing them. And
intimacy,
it's like,
yeah.
And so it scared me. It really, like, there was it was I had
fear.
an absolute fear of going, he's actually real. Yeah. Actually. Like, for real. Yeah. Like,
I want to hear that story, but I want to hear that story.
Ooh, but like, I think of one of the most powerful things. I've never, like, I've talked to a lot of people about the Lord. I mean, just naturally, because you're not going to get to know me without, like, it coming out.
Yeah.
Sure.
But most of the time I prefer people that don't know Jesus or are not involved in the Christian culture. I can't stand it. And that morning I remember thinking, man, one, God is actually real. And then two, like, crap, I'm going to have to be around Christians. Right? Like,
it's not fun.
Like, I'm like, oh man, I absolutely cannot. It at the time where I was in West Texas, it was about the most ancestral,
New Age.
It was about the fakest culture that you could do was go to church out there. And it was so bad. And I've seen that a lot in the Bible Belt, but like, and then I've been wrong at other times too. Like, I've grown a lot in it. I mean, I still cannot stand Christian culture. I think it's actually anti-Christian. Mm-hmm. It's about like, hey, me and being moral, and it's like, I thought it was about that we're not, and that Jesus saved you from it. So, but I think one of the things that, like, the most impactful things that I've seen throughout the years is it's not an intellectual argument or anything like that. Because I mean, man, there's people way smarter than me that would throw up stuff that I have no clue. And a lot of stuff I don't really know. I know some major basic things with God, and I know them not just biblically, but I know them, like, experientially.
Yeah.
But it's story. I think you nailed it when that's what excites me the most is people's story. So I got one for you.
Okay.
So my story's cool, but it's not near as cool as some other people's stories. Some people have some really cool ones. And this one guy, he was a pastor, and he came and he talked to me, and I did not record it. I'd kill myself for it. I'll get him back on. But he goes, when I was 30-something, I was in, where was he? Italy? I think he was in Italy. And he's in a small town in Italy, and he's at a conference. He was a business guy, was not a believer. He's walking down this road, and he turns the corner on this road, and this guy runs out to him, hands him a track, right? Like, he goes, if you were to die today, do you know where you go? And then he doesn't wait for his response, right? And so, like, there's a cringe in me when he first telling me that, because I'm like, oh man,
one of those.
you don't even know the person, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the guy doesn't even wait for his response; he just takes off running. And so he's like, what the heck? And he's walking down the street, but he just can't get this out of his mind. And he starts thinking, well, if I did die today, like, do I know how well did? Wow. And we know, right? Like, I know, like, that's the Holy Spirit, like, working on the guy. And and then pretty soon it's like, and then, through a couple days, like, he breaks down in his hotel and comes to know the Lord. Years later, goes through seminary and becomes a pastor of this small church. He's preaching one Sunday and tells the story of how he came to know God, and tells about the story about the guy that ran out. And then someone approaches him after church and says, what town in Italy was that?
No.
And he goes, was it at this corner? He goes, that's how I came to know God.
What?
that man ran out. So years later, he's preaching at a conference, tells the story. 5 different people come to him afterwards and go,
I have full
what
body
time
chills.
in it? What town in Italy was that? Years later, he's preaching at a pastor's conference. It's I think it was Acts 29 or something like that. It was a big, huge pastor's conference.
Wow.
And he tells the story, and he said 15 different pastors come to him, and they're like, "What town? That's the guy that came."
No.
And he's like, "What are the odds of this stuff?" And he asked everyone, every time he'd tell that story and people would come, he'd ask him, he'd be like, have you kept in touch with that guy? And they're like, "No, never.
He just
Don't even
ran
know
off.
his name."
Yeah.
So finally he's like, screw it. I've been successful, like I got some extra money now. My kids are in college. He's like, "I'm flying to Italy
I'm gonna find him.
and if that guy is still alive, I'm finding that motherfucker."
Yeah. Oh my
He didn't
god.
say that. But so he flies to Italy. He goes to that square and he sits there for a minute and he's like waiting for, and he's like, this guy has to be like 90 years old. Like,
What?
he's waiting for him to come out on a wheelchair or something. He's like, nothing. And so he starts asking around and he finally finds a girl that's like, "Oh, I know him. He's still alive. And he lives up here in this apartment." He's lived there for like 40, 50 years. It's an apartment above the little shop there. So he goes up to the apartment, knocks on the door. This little old man comes out and he says, "Are you so-and-so?" He's like, "Can I come in and talk to you? You gave me a track years ago and I came to know God." This is 30, 40 years later. And this little old man, 94 years old, just starts bawling.
Oh.
And he's like, "Sir, like, you don't know how many people, I mean, there's so many pastors and so many people that have come to know the Lord." And this guy's just bawling and bawling. And he's like, he clears up and he's like, "I'm at the end of my life." And he goes, when I came to know God, when I was 20, 30 or whatever, when I was younger, I made a promise to God because in his word, he says to share the gospel. He says, "I'm going to share the gospel with 10 people a day." And he's like, "I'm horrible with people. Like, so I just would go out there. I just got the tracts. I just go out there, give it to him and just be obedient to God."
Oh my god.
And he goes, "I'm at the end of my life. And I didn't think, no one has ever told me anything has happened. And I was wondering, has my life made a difference?
What?
Like, and you coming here telling me today, God sent you here to tell me today, right before I died."
Wow.
Dude, I mean, the stuff,
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
like, ooh, I mean, there's so much. One of the coolest parts of that story is that the guy did not see any results
Yeah.
for like 40 years. He just was obeying God. You
Yeah.
know?
Well,
That's your book, The Pursuit. When we talk about Jeremiah 29:11, where I have plans to prosper you.
Yeah.
But then what we don't know is the other side
it
of
was
it.
70 years. And that's become known as the prosperity gospel because people are like, "Well, prosper me now." And they're these prosperity preachers are like, "Well, their money going to show up on your porch if you just will it that way." And what God was saying is, I'm enough. I know I had a friend that asked me on a walk up in Nashville. We went on a walk one day and he goes, "God just asked me one day, I was praying, and he said, 'Am I enough?'" And I was like, that's a heavy duty question because, he had been successful and he's like, well, sooner or later though, I have to be enough, and when we talk about the walk, I grew up in Miami and I was a good kid all my life, grew up Catholic. And what happened was I had that religion, but I didn't know the word. I didn't have a relationship. And sure enough, in my mid-20s, I went off the rails. And I remember vividly the first time, like I never heard an audible word from God. Some people had, but I remember I'll just tell you that I was coming out of a club Sunday morning at 10 a.m. By myself. Do the math, right? In club clothes, 10 a.m. And I remember walking past families that were going to the beach, and I didn't want to look at them in the eye because I was ashamed. And I remember vividly, not the audible voice of God, but an intuition, an inner voice said, "David, you're chasing something that you're never going to quite get right now. I love music. I grew up with music. It's like it's embedded in my soul. But at that time in South Florida, Miami, just after the millennium, right around 2001, I was by myself, 10 o'clock in the morning. It takes a lot to stay up that late by yourself. So I picked up all my stuff the next day and I moved. I moved to Tampa to get out of that. And people would say, okay, well, there's your saving moment. No, but I just found another vice for the next 10 years. And it wasn't until I met this woman here on my right. Now, here's the story that I was going to tell you. So I was a journalist all my life. I was a reporter. I covered the NFL, and I would keep a journal at night. And I had dated all the wrong women for the wrong reasons, right? And finally, I realized that, I'm 36 years old. I've never been married. I've prayed because I come from a strong family, I prayed for a wife and children. That was my goal, but I wasn't doing anything to get there. And so one night I came home and I traded my vice and I was, kind of had a few drinks in me and I just wrote God in this. I said, God, you need to send me an angel. And I signed my name in that thing and I closed it. I literally signed my name. Like it was a request. And you need to send me an angel.
Send him a written petition.
Yeah. Now at that same time, I'd stopped going out, but I auditioned for Big Brother, the show Big Brother.
Oh, wow.
I made it through 3 auditions, then 4 auditions, and on the 5th one they said, we're sending you out to California to film this thing. So I fly out to California, can't tell anybody in my family. You have to, because you're sworn to secrecy. And I'm sitting there for 2 days sequestered in a hotel in LA waiting for them to start filming. You can't do anything. You have a half hour for lunch and you have 45 minutes to exercise. Other than that, you're in the hotel. And my family thinks I'm on a business trip. It's amazing what these reality shows are like. So finally here comes the knock on my door, right? And it's a production assistant. And I'm like, I'm going nuts in this room. Like, let's start filming. And she's like, well, I have some bad news for you. She's like, the producers are recasting the show. They're sending everybody home. And I live in Tampa at this point. I go, I want to get on a flight tonight, a red eye. Like, not tomorrow, not the next day. And this overwhelming feeling of, you idiot, David. Like, you thought a reality show was going to save you. You thought you were going to be famous. You thought you were going to get wealth. You thought you were going to find the woman of your dreams because you were going to be a reality TV star. And this overwhelming shame came over me. And as I got back on that plane at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night in L.A., I wrote on the back of again, I'm journaling, and I had nothing to write on. I wrote on the back of a vomit bag. What an idiot. How stupid can you be? You're 36, you have no career, you have no woman in your life. Everything has gone wrong, and it was the rock bottom point. And so I get back.
Did you leave that vomit bag in the seat?
I have it somewhere. No, I have it somewhere.
Someone picks it up.
Right, like, what is this? So here's the
bad day on an airplane.
The culmination of the story is, I'm working as an editor for a magazine, arts and entertainment magazine, and the publisher calls me up that day when I get home, and he's like, hey, you got to go do a story. And I was like, oh, I'm just having a really rough time. Like, I go, all right, well, what's the story on? He goes, well, this girl, she just won this Bikini Universe competition. And I was like, yeah, absolutely not. I'm like, absolutely not. I go, I've already been tortured enough. I just thought I was going to be on this reality show. I got kicked off. The last thing I want to do is sit across from this beautiful girl and interview her about, her dreams to become a weather person, like send somebody else. And he's like, I can't. You got to go. So the next day I show up and I'm doing all the things and I'm just totally not even looking at this girl because I don't want to see her, right? And I had made so many mistakes with people's names over the years, getting a Little League kid's name wrong, or some kid wins the scoring title and I misspell his name, and a parent, the next day my editor's like, you misspelled this kid's name, and his parents are mad. So at the end I go, all right, how do you spell your name? It's Angelique. It's Angelique, right? That's how you spell it. I know how to spell it. She's like, no, actually, I'm Greek, and in the Greek alphabet there is no Q, so it's Angelike. And I'll just tell you, today, 12 years later of marriage, we have people call our house, is angel-like there. And it's almost like God said, look, if you asked for an angel, I brought someone in your life whose name is spelled angel-like, but it's still at that point, we got engaged later on, right? Short romance, we got engaged, but I was so still into that party lifestyle. I was hanging out with a lot of people that were still into that. And I came to her and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, when we get married in a couple months, the invitations are out. Well, when we get married, hey, I'm not, this is what I do. I go out. I hang out. If I come home at 2:00 in the morning, if I take a cab home, I don't want to hear any crap from you about where were you or what were you doing. And what did you say? I'll let you finish the story.
Oh, my side of the story is always the best part. So, yeah, he did come home or to my house and with this attitude and he was tripping. He was totally tripping. But at the time, I was pretty deep already into my faith, and I really had to check myself for a second. I was like, this guy just fooled me. Like we've gone through an entire courtship. Now we're in an engagement. We're looking at putting in invitations out, and he's coming out here telling me a whole different story than that I know of him. So I said, I don't know who you are or what you did with the guy that I fell in love with, but you're not the guy I'm marrying. And I just said, look, when God brings two people together, it's not 50-50, it's 100-100. I'm here as 100%. I know who I am. I'm in the fullness and the wholeness in the image of him. And if you're not, then you're the wrong guy for me. So I took my ring off and I made it really clear to him that was not how I was going to go to the altar. And I said, but before you walk out that door forever, I said, I need you to open the Bible with me. And he was like, I'm a Catholic boy. I'm a good Catholic boy. I've been open. I'm sure I know the Bible. And what was the verse?
It was 1 Corinthians where Paul basically says, when I was a boy, I acted like a boy, and now it's time to put the childish ways of boyhood behind me and become a man. And it literally, ouch. David, seriously. Look, a lot of people embellish stories. A lot of people will say stuff and they'll embellish them, especially as years ago. Literally, something changed in that moment when I read that out loud, and she made me read it. Literally, something changed, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And that's why when we started this conversation about story and storytelling and podcasting, because God put stories in that Bible so we could relate to them. But I was a habitual ritual prayer person, like you said, religious. Like you said, a lot of people out there have a religion and they want to play it, but they don't know the stories. And that was the whole reason for writing The Pursuit, is because there are stories in there for every single thing that you may go through in life. All the big trials, there's a story in there of people who have overcome it or who have not overcome it. That's what I love about the Bible, is that it's not kumbaya. There is not a happy ending. When Jonah ran, he was able to fulfill his assignment from God, but the story of Jonah ends with him under a tree, miserable because he couldn't still forgive the Ninevites. He still hated those people. So there wasn't a happy ending for Jonah. And that's why I love this story, because that pierced my heart. And what it did is it started this roller coaster, this kind of tidal wave of events where we never separated since then. Mm-hmm. And then it went to another spot earlier on in our career where people were telling us, hey, if you're going to be a Christian and you're going to be an entrepreneur, you probably don't want to mesh those two. I'm going to give you advice, separate them, because you're going to cut off half of your audience, because half of your audience isn't going to want to hear about faith or your God story. And I remember exactly where I was at that point. We were 5 years into our marriage. We were celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary. We were in Sedona. And I looked out and I said, God, like everything we have, these 2 beautiful children we have, this successful company we have, the successful marriage we have is because of you. And people are telling me to shut you out. You know what I'm going to do, God? I'm going to double down on you. I'm going to go the opposite direction. I'm going to, instead of making you a footnote in my business, I'm going to make you a headline. And we went home and we went all in. Now, I won't say it's been easy, because we are in the world, and some people don't like that. But we made an agreement with the Lord that we were going to take everything that He gave us, because with all the blessings, and we were going to expose them and give Him credit for everything.
I think to your point though, Dave, you almost want to run the opposite direction sometimes from how that operates. In terms of whether it's a Christian worldview or religion or whatever, and because there's a lot of church hurt people out there, there's a lot of church disappointed people out there. There's a lot of people who use Scripture in the wrong ways, as more as a weapon in the wrong way. So for us, while he's a headline and we don't want to extract him from any parts of what we do, and we're very bold and courageous about it, at the same time, we're also very careful and very sensitive, because, it's to be a voice for the voiceless, to come for the lost, to look for the one among the 99, and that's really what faith is about, especially in business, and even in all the business ventures that we have and the training that we do. A lot of times what's interesting is that, you attract this avatar, if you will, but you'll always have these outliers that show up. And it's interesting what happens with the outliers. We've had so many people come into, whether it's our courses or our training or events, and it's just like, man, I was lost. I thought I was coming here for a business conference. I thought I was coming here to learn how to be a better speaker or presenter, or, strategies around this or that. And I ended up just completely having reconciliation with the Lord or finding the Lord. So you just have to we just have to trust, we have to trust that God that he's bigger than our plans, that he's bigger than our strategies. And when we try to white knuckle the process, we get too involved and we run ahead of them, and that's the whole point. It's like, we got to stop trying to run ahead. And for everything that we do, and even going back to your original question about podcasting, we had plans for it. We thought it was going to be one way. Sure. And we ended up running ahead, and we canned 6 or 7 episodes, and we listened to them. And we were like, this is crap. I wouldn't listen to this. Yeah. And so we just said, you know what, Lord, we're just going to put all our chips on the table. This is yours. Oh. You take control of the interview. You allow for those stories to be unleashed, and just let them rip, Oh. And eventually it took on an identity of its own, because it was no longer something that we defined, no longer something that, we had parameters around or rules around, or, this rigid, control around. We pray a prayer all the time. It's like, God, roll out the red carpet or slam the door shut. And you'll see the red carpets, and you'll just kind of go back and listen to those stories or relive those stories, or even at the end of the day after even meeting you, are like, God, how does that happen? How do things like that happen unless it's God? Like, unless God does some really cool orchestrating behind the scenes and all of these little puzzle pieces come together, you might not be able, and just for the listeners, like, you might not be able to figure out how the dots are connecting right now, but you can always figure out how they connect when you look back. And that's, our story. That's whether it's our marriage, our business, or anything else. Like, we've always looked back and go, now I understand. When I took myself out of that situation and didn't make an idol out of it, now I understand.
Dude, I feel like I'm 100% following you guys. I feel like I've learned more about God. It's almost like religion is like rules, outward appearance, blah, blah, blah. And then, but it's really about relationship, right? Mm-hmm. Everything's really around relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I've learned more about God from my kids.
Yeah. Totally.
Right? And so one huge one, right, is just going, oh my goodness, you view me like this? Like, especially my boy. Yeah, of course. Right? Like, he has, I feel like 99% of my genes and maybe 1% of Frank. Like, I'm looking at him like, I get it. Yeah. I know why you just pulled that fire escape alarm. I know why you just broke the one thing in this place that is like irreplaceable. I know.
Gosh, yeah.
Like, I get why you set that, like he nearly set our house on fire last week. Like, I mean, he put the microwave on for 100 and something minutes. Yeah, it was bad. Like, it's always, but like, and I think about like that stuff, and I'm like, how much there's nothing that any of them could do that I wanted. Like, dude, I'm crazy about those kids.
Sure.
Both me and Fran, I mean, we just eat them up. And, I mean, there's times.
Sure.
Right?
Oh,
where it's
come
like,
on, yeah. It's parenthood.
It's like, get your butt in there.
Yes, exactly.
But I feel like one of the main things that so for instance, we'll go to, when we take them on a trip, or we're going to go to Disney World or something. Although I may never go to Disney World again. But
that makes
we went every year I've been there every year for 49 years of my life, because I grew up in Florida. My daughter's been there for her birthday every year. This is since she was 1, and this is her first year we didn't go. Yeah. But we try to teach them a lesson. We're like, we're not going to put our money, and even if nobody knew about it, even if we went and didn't take any pictures or didn't post it, it still comes down to your integrity. What are you going to support? And it was a great teaching opportunity for our kids, because they loved it. I mean, all of our hardcore memories of the holiday season and my daughter's birthday, which is this month, has taken place in this. We stay in the same campground that my dad took me when I was their age. Wow. And so everything is so wrapped around that, and we just made a decision as a family that we are going to live by integrity. even that's the rule about integrity, doing what's right even when nobody's watching. So even if nobody knows, you can't say don't support this and then you go support it. So I told our girls we will live by integrity. It was tough.
So what were you saying about your planning a trip with the kids?
Well, like for instance, like you're saying with Disney World or a place, like I'd be like, hey, let's go. Like let's go get in the car, right? And then you're trying to put one in a car seat, and they're like, I just want to stay here. I just want to play with, whatever. I just want to break your stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and so, like, and I will be putting them in a car seat, and I mean, just kicking, fighting, right? And the tendency is to be like, force them in the car seat,
right.
snap it shut the door, right? But the other day I was like, okay, you're going to go exorcist on me. And I mean, he just like full on, the baby's like, back curled, like, And I sat there and I just let her have this fit. And I waited till she was exhausted. And then I slowly put her arms in the car seat and clipped it together. And then, 5 minutes later, we're at the beach or whatever it is. And I mean, she's having an absolute blast. And I just had the thought of like, man, and this is every day I have thoughts like this, that it's like God's going, hey, trust me. And if there's one thing that I tell my kids over and over, just listen.
Yeah.
Just listen, right? Like I have better plan. I know you don't even have a clue of what I know that you guys don't. And you don't even have a clue of how much more I am for you, even in the fun stuff.
Yep.
I want you to have fun just as much as you do. In fact, I know better at what to do for you to have fun than you do.
Yeah.
Right? Like you think you know, but you don't know all the options out there.
Yeah.
And like
It's the heart of the Father.
And I'm like, man, does God really love me like that? Does he really want me to have like incredible time, like fun, fun times too?
Because like you said earlier, you alluded to, most people think when you become a Christian and you follow the Lord that your life is not fun. It's boring. And it's not. Like in my book, I use the Ned Flanders example, right? Homer Simpson's next door neighbor. He's got the mustache and he's got the cardigan sweater and everyone thinks, oh, you're a Christian. Yeah, you're Ned Flanders. And it's not like that.
No.
But one of the other important things is when we realize what your point is about how he relates to us and how, especially, I don't have a son, but that father-son relationship between God and us and the father-son relationship between an earthly father and an earthly son or earthly daughter. When you think about this in this new age world, we've been to conferences where, really famous people will get up and say, well, God, the universe, or whatever you believe in. And this is where I have a problem, because think about this. No, it's not. Now, I'm not going to force you, and I'm not going to be one of those people who say you're doing it wrong, but I will not agree to God, the universe, or whatever because of this, because we serve a jealous God, and it says that in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And if we say to one of those people, hey, but we serve a jealous God, they're like, well, why would I want to worship a God who's jealous? That's not good. That's not the God that I want to worship. And I say, wait a minute. Let me ask you, David, this as a parent. Let's say you're at the park, all right? And you're there with your son. And he's playing, he's doing all these things, and he's doing a really good job. He's being nice with all the other kids. And somebody walks up to you and says, that young man over there, he's just a good young man. And the guy next to you goes, thank you. I appreciate that. You'd be like, whoa. What are you taking thanks for? That's my kid. That's the fruit of my labor. That's the one I poured all my love into. Why would you take that? Because I'm his father. I'm jealous. That is my kid. So a jealous God wants to be that way. Plus, a jealous God means what? He's a relational God. It means he cares. I would be more worried. I would tell those people, I would be more worried if he wasn't jealous.
Well, it's like
if
your
he
spouse.
said I didn't care. Yeah, if she said, hey, David, you know what?
True.
Go out and have fun with as many women as you want. I'd be like, don't you care? I love you, but I don't really care. I'm like, I want you to be jealous. I don't want you to like that. So I think that's a really important concept that you brought up.
There's a difference between jealous and controlling. There's a huge difference. And I think that when we don't do a word study in semantics and understanding, the syntax and the word order, of course, and when you look into, theology, it's jealous and not controlling, jealous and like relational. That my love for you is so deep and so wide and so expansive and so intimate that no, it's not okay that you go run around.
Right.
No, it's not okay that you take credit for my child. No, it's not okay. Because we are relational. We are connected by something so divine and so deep and so expansive that you cannot blur those lines. So it's not about me enforcing something on someone's belief system. It's a matter of you understanding how special and intimate that is. It's so different than this whatever you believe. It's just different. It's just different. It's sacred. It's sacred and it's beautiful.
But at the same time, just so people are clear, people have to come at the right time for the right reasons. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. When we were in Nashville, one of the bucket list things, we saw Kiss, right? Kiss was coming. I'm like, babe. I'm like, let's not just go. Let's
of his bucket list things, not mine.
I had to drag her. I told you, I absolutely love music. I go, babe. I go, bucket list. I go, let's not go, just go. Let's get like really good seats, right? So as we're walking into the Kiss concert, and I've seen this several different places, there's these guys out there with bullhorns and the big signs, and they're literally yelling at people with bullhorns, "You're going to hell." Right? And I look at her and she looks at me and she goes,
Who are you getting?
What do you think their conversion rate is? And I'm like, it's not good. You know?
You know what? He might be like the guy in Italy. You never know. He might be the guy.
And so we go into the concert and the screens drop and the fire comes out. And at the first, and we went all in. I mean, we went face paint all in. We got, and it was awesome. Remember, I grew up with Kiss with the old-fashioned 1970s mask with the little rubber band in the back. But it was about 35, 40 minutes into the concert, and Gene's up there, and the blood's coming, and there's like black cats on the screen and all kind of dark symbolism. And he's, just wiggling his tongue with blood. And she looks at me, and she's like,
I'm out.
She's like, I just can't
can't
anymore.
do it.
And I'm like,
just
hey, you know what? And I could separate these two. I'm like, okay, bucket list, I felt both. I felt convicted that I really shouldn't be there. It did get really dark. I know it's a spiel. It's an act. I went to a band. You guys heard of Slayer? Mm-hmm. So I went to a Slayer concert back in the day, and I didn't really like him. I wasn't a fan. And my two buddies at the time, they were personal friends with him. And so these guys are out there, and the lyrics are really dark, and they're heavy metal, banging the heads. And these guys go backstage after the concert. And so I couldn't go backstage. But they're back there for like 45 minutes, and they come out. And I'm like, what's going on back there? It's chaotic, right? It's nuts. And he's like, no. Lead singer's back there playing cards with his wife and his two teenage kids playing cards. I'm like, oh. So it's it's an act. It's a facade. But what the audience doesn't know, most people don't see that guy back there playing cards with his wife and kids, turning it on and off. They just see that. And they go into it. And the word says you can't do that. You can't lead people down a false path and say, well, it was just an act. Right. I didn't know.
Yeah.
There are consequences for that stuff. So I do believe that people don't, the worst thing you could do is try and force something on somebody. You have children, right? Do they like broccoli?
One, I think, May.
Yeah. Our little one who's 2, if you ask the 7-year-old there for broccoli, she'll fight you tooth and nail. We actually made her one time stand in a square. This sounds really bad. But I said, until you try this, you're going to stand in that little square in the kitchen. And how much? An hour and a half later?
Probably.
Standing there?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we gave out before she did because I felt like now it's torture. But she would have stood there all night because she didn't want broccoli.
I didn't even think it was broccoli. I think it was like... I don't know. It was just dinner.
Well, we couldn't force that. We couldn't force that on her. And so I just want to make sure, like, I came in here today and I'm always like, temper yourself, Dave. Like, if we talk to somebody or we go on air, like, temper yourself. Don't get excited. But
let it rip.
You see what happens.
That's our slogan, actually.
It comes out. But at the same point, I realize that you can't force one of the things you can't do. You can't force things on people. You can lead them. You can show them scripture. You can love on them, but you can't force it. That people have to come at their own time. Mm-hmm. I wasn't ready before then. I had to have that moment where God said, "You're gonna end up in a bad place. You're chasing something." It was like that carrot in front of you remember they used to have with a carrot in front of the donkey pulling the cart, and the donkey would never quite get to it. That was music for me. That was ecstasy for me. It was that carrot that was there that would give me a temporary happiness, but you walked out going, this isn't reality. Like, I can buy this for a couple hours on the weekend, but there's, 5 more days in the week. And that's what I had to come to that realization.
So I love what y'all are saying. I've been in AA for 20, well, shoot, let me have to edit that out. Well, I've been in a 12-step program for 21 years. Coming up on 22, actually.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
So,
Huge.
like, I still, to this day, like, I sponsor guys and take guys through the steps. And before starting all this, I was a professional counselor, and I was running, helping run with some partners, some transitional living homes out in Dallas. And we just worked with guys after guys after guys after guys.
Wow.
But some of the best stuff that I've heard has been between counseling and AA. And the other day, one of the guys said this in a meeting. He said, some days I'm the teacher, some days I'm the student, and some days I'm the lesson.
Yeah, that's good.
That is
That's
good.
really good.
Yeah, there's so many good. Someone else said the other day, this lady started and she said, there's rain on the plain in Spain. And then she goes, there's rain on the plain in Spain. And, people sitting around are probably like, okay, we got a live one. And she goes, that's the phrase that I had to repeat over and over while I'm sitting in a doctor's office trying to learn how to speak again from drinking for 20 years or so.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just really cool.
Yeah.
But like some of the best, one of the things I think with AA that I love so much is that I feel like it is how church really should be, in a sense, like more like a hospital than like a pageant show or like a social club. It is, everyone comes to AA. No one goes there on a winning streak, right? Like everyone comes there because they're broken, right? Everyone comes there because they're in need. Like, what's the passage? The healthy don't need a physician.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so you're coming there. Now, AA isn't, despite what some Christians would say, like, it's a universalist or whatever. AA isn't about defining God at all. AA is really, if you really actually read the steps and do the steps, it's really about the fact that you're not God. There is one and it's not you.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. It's saying, hey, there is one. We're not telling you who it is or what to do, but we're just saying, hey, it can't be you. Yeah. Right? Which I think in a lot of ways, at least on my side, some people just get it, I guess, but like I needed that humble, like that continually. I still need this humbling.
You die to yourself.
Yeah. Well, and just really like practical, like I play God, right? I try and get my needs met. That's my deal. Like I try and meet my needs, when the truth is not even that God will meet my needs if I trust him or whatever. If you're Assembly of God or Pentecost, like if you trust him.
Oh yeah.
I got a cool story on that too. But it's like he's already met him.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to meet things that are already been met in a sense, and it's like, bro, just stop. And I think in a lot of ways it's really more. I think with evangelism specifically, I think it's more about love. Like the goal should be loving people. Really, should be loving people, and in those times, in those moments of just praying and going, okay, God, what do you want me to say? Like because man, there's been things that I've said that I've been like, okay, that's the exact opposite, and dudes have come to know. Like, and it's never one person, by the way. So no one can really it's never like, oh, this one guy did it, or this one girl did this, and then I came to know the Lord. Yeah. It's because of them. It's like, no, it's not. Usually there's a slew of different people, and they each play a little role.
Oh, yeah.
And God's the orchestrator.
So
she
started that with me, and then it came to a point where she goes, I can't take you any farther as your wife and a woman. You need a male role model, a spiritual father, mentor. And And that was the person that the next part of it was a guy who we sat in his church, and everybody responds to different leaders and different people. I like a no BS leader. I want someone that's going to say it like it is and call it out and not sugarcoat anything. And this person was like, he would just right there. I was like, whoa, that's bold, but I like it.
Every sheep needs a shepherd.
And he said,
what?
What?
Have a covering.
Remember, he said there's knowledge teachers and there's love teachers. Knowledge teachers
puff up,
right? Like, I'm smarter than you. This is what you're supposed to do. And love teachers build up, right? And that really made a lot, because that's what we see today, especially on social media. Everybody has their 3 steps, their 5 steps. Everybody has, this is what you should be doing, and everybody's an authority on something. And so we have a lot of knowledge teachers out there that puff up. This is what I've done. This is what I do to make millions. This is what I do to be happy. But love teachers build up. And it's really hard. It's really hard in our society and our structure because of this phone right here, because of social media, because of the word significance. We are really, truly, that is, when we talk about drugs and addiction, whether it's alcohol, ecstasy, the new drug and addiction is significance. And significance is that little heart there. It's that little comment box. It's that little like box. I mean, when we're training people, we say, if you can say something and not check your phone to see if you got validation, to see who thought you were significant enough, if you can say something with that kind of power and not need that validation, not need that significance, then you're in a good spot. But if you're saying something and you're constant, I need that validated. I need people to say that I'm right about that or they agree with me. And if they don't, then I'm going to feel bad about myself. That's a dangerous place. When we see this box, it's done so many things. When our kids are half a country away from my parents and they could FaceTime in real time and see them and almost like they're there, that's a plus. When we can do telemedicine, that's a plus. When we can do these things, but it's a slippery slope, and sometimes it becomes our new idol, especially when it comes to significance, and that's scary to me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's supposed to reach, the gospel specifically is to reach 4 corners of the earth, right? To all nations and all people. Well, that's what technology gives us the ability to do, right? So it is a double-edged sword, and we're able to reach people through technology. But at the same time, it cannot become our idol. It cannot become our God. It cannot become that controlling, vice in our life that then, either prevents us from moving forward or second guess ourselves or, try to manipulate things so that we're fitting into some box literally. And that's where I think where we lose it is we end up being ruled by something else. And eventually we can lose our own ethos through that.
Yeah, 100%. Would you say that, hey, no phones, go straight? Is it Amish? Or
the Amish don't. Yeah.
Shoot. Go straight that way, or hey, it's not really an external issue; it's a heart issue, and if you everything's good.
I'll ask you this. Could you have a couple of drinks?
No.
Okay. So what we see is
we can try. You want to see what happens?
No, don't
exactly. Do that. I mean, I've been right there, and what we see is left alone. This thing will never go away. The ability. I wrote a book on it, and sometimes my wife is sitting there, and Angelique will go, Dave, you wrote a book on being turned on, and you're sitting there, you almost walked into a pole because you're sitting there on your phone. and she goes, it's really incongruent. And I realized, I'm like, it's the same thing. You'll never beat this. I talked to a doctor from Georgetown for my book, who had studied this, and he's like, the dopamine effects there's reasons why the lights are on there. There's reason why the sounds are on there. And he goes, and your kids know, even when it's on the table and they're having your attention, our kids no, Mom and Dad, it's not good enough that it's turned off or it's on silent. Put it in a drawer. Mm-hmm. Our children at 7 and 10, put it in a drawer. Because we can't.
Our business is on there. We're not on there messing around. But that's part of it.
Sometimes we are. The genie's already out of the genie's already out of the box. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you just like somebody with an addiction has to be able to say no. It's a little bit different because you're going to be able to use this. If you're not, you're going to be locked out of a lot of commerce. right? You're going to be locked out of a lot of things. So it's not an all or nothing. The point I was trying to make is that you'll never beat it. No one says, hey, I've beaten alcoholism. You're always going to have
Always
it
recovering.
there. You're always in, and so no one's ever going to beat this phone and say, I've conquered it. You're always going to have that temptation. And that's why it's an addiction, a dopamine addiction, just like you would have with any other kind of narcotic or any kind of sex addiction or any kind of alcoholism. It's always going to be a temptation to abuse it, and you'll never beat it.
I do admire the Amish though for that.
I feel you. What I love about with the gospel is like the freedom with it, right? It's going, hey, it's a heart issue, right? Like and with alcohol addiction, drug addiction for me, I mean, I literally didn't think I was going to live into my 20s, right? Like I did not see myself going anywhere but death or prison. I mean, I thought
I've been there.
I had literally at 16, I'd been arrested 15 times, and I was heading into my 4th rehab. And like my parents were approaching the judge saying, hey, how can we emancipate him?
Yeah.
One of the is a Texas judge there. He said, son, do you have anything to say for yourself? And I said, go fuck yourself to the judge.
Wow.
Ooh. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He's like, all right.
Okay.
He's like, you have, he basically gave me every violation that he could. And I was probably going to only do probably a year and a half. Well, a year and a half with good behavior. So I probably would have done, it probably wouldn't have been, it probably been more, but went to the last rehab. God saved me in that 9 months in that, it's a juvenile place out in Texarkana, Texas. And when I came back, literally, came back a different person. Like when you hear the words like reborn.
Yep.
It's like such a foreign, but man, I don't know of another way to describe it other than like.
Totally.
I mean, even food tasted different for me.
Interesting.
Like, I mean, it's like, for me, it's so sudden black, white, like old person, new person. Now, I mean, I wasn't new, great person, right? Like, I still suck. But like I literally was... Everything was different.
Well, that's why he's so personal. I think
100%.
some people need a process. They need a process, and like you said, all those kind of dots, and it's gradual, and then other people, in your case, like it got blown up in your face,
Yes.
and you literally supernaturally needed to be that changed that quickly, because in your case, you probably would have been dead.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's how personal he is. He's like, the plans I have for you.
Yeah.
Need to come to fruition, need to prosper. And the only way I can do that is through a complete, being completely reborn right now. No. And I think everyone's so, wired so differently. His plans for everyone are so unique. And so I love it when I watch the process in some, like his was such a process.
20 years, like, from one addiction to another, and not seeing the light, and being from a Catholic background, where I'll tell you this for sure, 100%, when I was a kid, hey, stay away. Anyone who says they're born again Christians, stay away from them. And so I thought born again Christians were bad, when all it really means is that you accepted Jesus as an adult. And I've been through the process. I remember I had a nephew similar to you. He was 10 years younger than me, and he pulled a fire alarm in 7th grade, dropped out in 8th grade, wrecked a car, overdosed, and I sat there looking at him going, hey. And his thing, I had to talk about, he wanted to get F the world tattooed across his neck. That was
I love this guy.
Yeah, that was his tattoo. And I looked at him, and we were talking in the garage. I remember it like yesterday, and I said, hey, this is not good. You're going to end up dead or in jail. He's like, yeah, Uncle Dave, I know. But even when you've counseled people, right, you have people saying, I know, but deep down inside, they don't mean it. And that's why you can't force it on them. And so at 19, he gets a 16-year-old girl pregnant. And I'm at their wedding, and she's showing, and I'm like, this is a disaster. He's all, tatted up. He hates the world. He's got no job prospects. He doesn't have his GED yet. She's showing. She's 16. This is a disaster, right? I got choked up about this the other day because I was talking about it on our podcast. That little baby that they decided to keep at 16 and 19. She just graduated with honors from high school and got a full scholarship.
So
They've
cool.
been married almost 20 years. They have 3 children. You know, he's got a great job. She's got a great job. You know, not everybody makes it, but they know the Lord now. They weren't saved immediately. They just made that decision to get married and have that baby probably on a whim when a lot of people wouldn't. But what I'm saying is we don't see what's happening, the fruit that's going to happen later on from a decision. You know, it was Charles Spurgeon who talks about the free agency of man and the will of God when they can intersect. That's a beautiful place, but most time they don't, because one of the things we learn most is that God has given us free will. He is not a micromanager, and some of the decisions, Spurgeon says, decisions in our life hang on a thread of us saying yes or no to something. Like you said, you would end up dead or in jail. One more drink, one more drug for me, one more bad decision could end up dead or in jail, right? And for some reason, we got another chance. Some people don't. Some people never wake up. They take a drug and they never wake up and get another chance. So we have a responsibility, if we do have that chance, to share that story with someone else who needs that chance.
Yeah, 100%. I love this guy. I want to meet him.
Yeah,
it's like I get him. And when counseling people, right? Like in counseling, I mean, I'm so effed up in so many different ways. Like I feel like what made me decent at counseling was being able to relate to just about anything. I'm like, I can put myself in your shoes. Sure. Because, okay, you got deep shame issues. Gotcha.
Yeah.
You have this. I gotcha. Yeah. So this morning when I'll tell it shortly. So I'm in this rehab, right? And Texarkana, Texas. Have you ever been there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many times.
I'm sorry.
Driven through there many
It
times.
smells horrible. It's the paper mill in that town. It's like it's a split town. Half of the town is like super racist whites, and the other half of the town is black. And so like there's like constant turmoil in the town. And so we lived in this. I mean, it was just a hardcore place. It was, you're in groups all day long. If I put my leg up like this, I get written up. I have to have I have to have both legs on the ground, and then your chairs, and you have to put your hands on your knees. You have to listen. Like you super strict. If you screw up within 3 times that week, you go to boot camp for the weekend, and you don't get your 2 hours of relaxing. And so, like, I'm in this place, and I'm spitting on the carpet. I'm spitting on people. I'm, like, trying to fight the biggest guys there, not because I'm tough, just because I want someone to, like, punch me and get me out of there. I'm writing my signature on there. Fuck you is my signature for everything.
Wow.
I'm kicking out windows. Like, I'm just like absolutely horrible. And so I had said, I'm not coming out of a room. There's nothing you do to make me do that. And so I'm 3rd day into it, right, on my protest. They're like, you're going to get hungry. Like, there's only so much water you can drink in this room. And my buddy goes, hey, I'm going to church this morning. It's the only chance you get to get out of this place for a little bit. Do you want to get in the druggy buggy and come with everyone to church? And I'm like, not a chance. I grew up in church. My dad was a deacon, like Assembly of God, very spirit-filled.
Yeah.
I was like, no way. He's like, the pastor has these 2 hot daughters. They're these twins, and they're smoking hot. I said, I'm in.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So
the motivation was there.
yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go. Like, you're monitored constantly. There's nothing, but in your head, you're like, all right, I'll find a way. So we hop in the drug buggy. We head to the church. We go through this church, and at the end of this sermon, I mean, we were as a group, we're all in the back, about 20 guys. At the end of this church service, someone from that town, maybe an angel, I don't know, but some random person there at that church, and I I didn't listen to even a single word of that sermon. This guy comes up to me and grabs me by the shoulder and he says, "Hey, buddy, your name's David, right?" I'm like, do you have a name tag on me?
No.
Nothing.
Wow.
Right? And he goes, "David Fields." I'm like,
Wow.
you crackhead?
Yeah.
He's like, "God wants me to tell you something." And he starts going into, he started off with, stop judging the pastor and worry about the message. And he starts going into like real specific stuff. Like I started immediately as this guy started talking, like it, not in a charismatic Benny Hinn pass you out in the Holy Spirit way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I got weak where I could barely stand.
Oh, sure.
And it
Spirit,
wasn't a spiritual, supernatural like thing. It was, I was scared. I knew at that moment God was real.
Yeah.
That's what I got from that whole thing. I mean, you know the dudes are like mind tellers or whatever.
Yeah.
They just like I bet there's someone significant in your
Yeah.
life, right? It's like, yeah, there is.
Yeah.
How they know?
Yeah.
It's like the things this guy was like. I mean, it was, but it wasn't just that. It was like the confirmation internally what happened to me for the next 2 months. Like I don't think I stopped crying. I mean, I'm a dude who like, I wasn't hard. I was scared, but like, I was like, I mean, I was just constantly fighting and like, I was just out of freaking control. And I'm bawling. I'm reading the Bible every chance that I get it, every little break in between groups. I'm listening to every group. I'm journaling. I'm doing every single thing all day long that I can to get to know God. Wow. And I'm like, I mean, at nighttime, like I got a flashlight, got permission by them to let me have a flashlight so I could read the Bible after the lights out. Right. And I'm reading Revelations. I'm like trying to read, it's the worst. This one kid across from me one night goes, "Dave, what the fuck has happened to you, dude? You are crazy." He's like, this is like a repeated offender place. So they're like,
Yeah.
This isn't, these are hard kids, right?
Yeah.
Like,
That's my my
kids
nephew was
in
at the
gangs.
sheriff's ranch, the Florida Boys Sheriff's Ranch. It's the same the same program.
Yeah. And he's like, "You're the crazy motherfucker in here."
Yeah.
Like, he's like, "Now you just can't stop crying and you're just reading the Bible." And I'm like, "Dude, God is real, man. Wow. He's real." And he's like, "Hey, I know." He's like, I prayed when I was younger, man. I'm a Christian." I go, No. And I go, "I just read this." And I flip over and I'm like, "If he is lukewarm, he will spit you out of his mouth." And this kid got completely out of context, right?
Yeah.
But
still, yeah.
but God I think used a lot of that stuff. But
Absolutely.
through it, I ended up like, it was crazy. This really hardcore group of guys that God used me to lead them, and just naturally, and we ended up turning that house into our free times that we had. We'd started doing prayer groups and Bible study. I mean, the entire house.
Yeah.
It was
Wow.
it was insane, and God was like changing people. It was incredible.
Yeah, it starts with, if we're going to fix the world, it starts with men, I mean, look, I'm a big champion of women. I know you have daughters, I have daughters, and we both love our wives, and we're champion of women, and we believe in equal rights. What I mean is, it starts with men. The biblical house starts with the man, and we're supposed to honor our wives. We're supposed to lead our children to the faith, and so when we see men that are working with other men, and we talk about being vulnerable, we talk about those things. I mean, like I told you the other day, I know a guy who is 35 years in recovery, and I asked him, I go, "What was your turned on moment?" And he goes, "I was sitting there and on my front porch, and my hands were full of blood, and I heard sirens, and they were getting closer." He goes, "I didn't know what I had just done because I was that messed up." He goes, "But I knew that they were coming for me." And he told me this story very vividly. He goes, I was at one point on my way to someone's house to kill them. And I stopped off at a place, and this guy talked to me, and that guy talked to me about God, and that changed my life. So, I mean, think about how he intervenes. And now what he does is he talks to the most hardcore bikers, gang members and stuff who are in addiction programs, in 12-step programs. And I'm like, tough dude, you know, like really tough dude. Like he's doing some work that not a lot of people can do. But it starts with men. We gotta fix men, and we gotta turn them onto the Spirit.
Yeah, I think so. I think I don't think I mostly go off. I mostly go off my experience, right? Because I don't know a lot of times, or I think I know something, and then a year later I'm like, wait, I didn't really like that. Wasn't right, and so like I just go a lot off my experience and. Like I went through seminary, right? I'm still recovering from it, right? Like it was, dude. Just bad. Like I'm trying to like distance so much from a lot of that theology. I'm not saying it's bad or like, but what I am saying is that mindset isn't, because it gets away from relationship. And so, beginning of this year, me and my wife really, I was like, man, I'm not having it. Another year that I have any sort of regret or anything that I'm like, man, I could have done. I'm leveling up. Every day I'm leveling up. And here's the things I want to do. I'm going to start jiu-jitsu. I'm going to start working out. I'm going to like from those things to, hey, we're going to get roles really right in our marriage because God says it. And so we literally was like, hey, there are roles. Yes, we are equal.
There you go.
But we're different.
Right.
That's her jam right there too.
We are like,
that is my jam.
since that's why a lot of this stuff lately, it's like, since when like two things being different means that they have different, like that they're not the same of value. It's like, hey, celebrate the difference. Like, and so I literally was going, okay, I do agree. It starts with like, it's more than just important for the man because it's like, men has to ingrain it so much so that his wife can respond and is able to be in that safe place of just being able to just respond. And as a man, you want that. Yeah. Right. And so we're like, okay, wash her in the water word. So we're on like day 290 something of reading the Bible over my wife. Right. And so, and we'll miss a day, and then like the next day I'll do two. Like we're like, okay, like we're super regimented on it now. I love it. But like we don't sit around and talk about it or have this. I'm just gonna do it. Yep. Yeah. I'm gonna do it because God said it, and that simple. And then I'm like, I'm gonna listen to her in an understanding way. You'll like this one. This may help you. So, and every guy that I've told this to is so far has been like, oh man, because it's. I don't know. That guy needs to be told it different. Like, I think women sometimes may try and tell a guy it, but not in the same language because we are very different. Men and women are very different. Absolutely. Women primarily feel their way through life, right? And so, like, feelings can trump, like, other things, especially really strong feelings. It's not that they don't think or logical or rational. 100% are. It's not that we don't have feelings. We 100% do. But I lead my life through thought and ration, and like I work things out through thought and ration. Women a lot of times work things out through feeling. Like it's a whole other thing. And so with my wife, every night, not every single night, but almost every night, something throughout the day, I'm like, all right, like talk to me, and she'll be like, about what? I'm like, what's wrong? What's going on? Download your day. Like, and I just begin to just listen. Mm-hmm. And then it goes from one layer and then begins to go to another layer. And this is like, it's insane how much women like process throughout the day. And then it's like, it'll go pretty soon after the first layer. I need to hang out with Fran. It would go down to this next layer that's like, well, you know, you're mad at me because of this. And I said that all those things are false, but I don't say a word about it. I listen to her and I'm like, I hear you. What else? Tell me more. Get it all out. I'm not stopping until you get it out. We're not going to quit this conversation until you get it all out. So like, we can take as long as you want tonight, but like I'm not, and I'm going to be the judge of it, not you, because she'll tell me it's all good. I'm like, it's not. I can see, like, until you have that glow in you, I'm not going to stop. And so she then will go into, and usually, you know, almost every night, like crying. It's some sort of tear. And a lot of times with us, it'll be like with something I said or a facial expression that I made, or in how she interpreted it, how it made her feel. And then sometimes I'll just to make sure I understand, I'm like, what I'm hearing you saying is this. And then I'll be like, no.
That's really good on your part. That's really good.
But she'll say a lot of things that are like crucially incorrect, and that is why it's led her to assume these things. It's like, you thought when I said this, I didn't mean that. But I don't correct any part of it, because as soon as I correct one thing, I say, friend, that's not true.
You close off.
You know why? Because I did not validate that emotion. It is not about, the purpose of her talking is her to share, like, to get the emotion out. She's like, it doesn't matter to her whether that's true or not, which is crazy to guys, I think, because it's like, how could it not matter?
Right. We're logical. And
when I talk to someone, right, what I'm saying is, the words that I'm saying is what I'm trying to express. For women, it's like, even the words don't necessarily matter as much as the feeling behind them, or how those words make them feel. And so, like, dude, she's told me so many nights, so much stuff. I'm like, oh my God, that is like so much of that is not correct. I actually think or feel the opposite.
Right.
And
it's a misinterpretation of what we've seen of the character, and we read it the wrong way, and we make assumptions. And if we don't have the lines of communication open, then the assumptions are totally wrong. And she said, we're not going to bed. And you know, guys will think, hey, we can fix this with sleep or sex. If we fix it with sex first and sleep second, I'll be up in the morning and everything will be fine. And we learned early on that she's like, that's not going to work. We have to talk it out. And I don't care if we're up to 3 o'clock in the morning. We're not going to go to bed on this.
Yeah, you don't let the sun go down in your anger. Well, I really love everything that you're sharing here, because so interestingly enough, just through all of our course development and things that we've taught over time and groups that we've led, I remember specifically God just impressing upon my heart, because so many people are like, how do you balance it all? How do you do this? And I'm like, God, he just keeps telling me order. There's no balance here. And so I was like, well, God, what do you have to say about order? You know, what is it that you have to say about order? Why, you know, what is this exercise that I can give people? What can I help people do that's pragmatic? And he took me really straight to Genesis 1. And I looked at how he laid out everything from the foundations of the world to man, woman, and be fruitful and multiply. And there is an order. And this is so important what you're hitting on, because when you look at the first thing he did was he hovered. He hovered, and it was a dark, formless void. Well, when you're in a dark, formless void in your life, it's probably time for you to hover and know who God is, because he's the only one that can flip the switch, turn on the light, and start to create an environment where things can then have life and be fruitful and multiply. Like, it all starts with, you know, understanding that order has to come out of chaos, because if we stay in the chaos, we're never going to fix anything. And then you go back to relationship. He didn't make Adam and Eve at the same time, and he didn't make Adam and then say, okay, Adam, what do you think about this Eve chick? You know, should she be 36, 24, 36 with blonde hair and blue eyes? No, he put him to sleep, because he can't have a say about it at all. And that's the whole point. Like let God be God, and let you be man, and let she be woman, you know. And essentially we are all, you know, made uniquely in his image, but in the wholeness and fullness of him, which means we are representing all sides of him, all sides. You know, the man for his strength and his covering and his power and his vision and his ability to lead the family and be in that role. Yet the world is teaching that testosterone is toxic, for crying out loud. You know, we're just in such a weird place and time, and that women are so empowered these days that they're cutting off and castrating their own spouses, and they're sitting in the background. I'm like, what's going on here? The reason why your house is disrupted and in order, you know, in chaos, is because we're out of order.
Yeah, 100%. But hey, what do you think about this, though? I think for me, it's real clear of like, hey, you know, as, you know, for the man, lead, protect, provide, right? Yes, that doesn't mean, hey, you have to make all the money. Yes, that doesn't mean that.
No, gosh,
but what it does is like you're responsible for it being made. You're responsible. You hold it on your shoulders. And as a lead part of it, you have to take you need to initiate and create this environment. It's on you ultimately when it falls back to you. But I think a lot of times though. So, well, I'll just use experience. I do better with experience, right? Like,
of course.
I'm not, there's a lot of people that are a lot more smarter than me. But I think of like when I am being weak, and I use this word weak, externally it may look kind of strong or like holding yourself, but like what's happening to me, I'm like, I'm wanting friend to validate me, or I'm in feelings, right? Mm-hmm. It's not that I don't have feelings, right? But I don't need validation on them. I don't need to, and I'm not going to throw a pity party about like, man, I want you to have sex, but like, no, like all those things are me being weak in a lot of ways. But when I'm in a place of strength and I'm growing and I'm focused on what I need to focus on and I'm going, voila, all of a sudden my wife comes under and fall in naturally.
Yeah.
Right? Like I could throw a pity party and all that stuff and get transactional sex, right? Or I could lead in a strong way naturally and get true genuine desire, right? And I think that's, so bringing it back to talking with my wife, this thing, and I still don't think I have it figured out completely, but this thing that I've done this year has been probably one of the most transformative. I've seen my wife get into her feminine as I'm in my masculine, like more than ever by like 10x.
Yeah, I think it's something really good that you're onto.
Well, it's primal.
I feel it.
Yeah.
We're in the same way, you know, and I totally, when you say that, I totally understand it, because you're right. When there's ways to force things and there's ways, the natural order of things, and it just works out easier. Then you both come into this agreement where things are working out better, and like, wow, it could have been this way the whole time if I would have just done more of this.
Well, and it would be kind of a covert contract type of deal of like, I'm going to I'm over here and I'm doing this stuff. Mm-hmm. Like now you should, but as I've grown and have been learned and have really dropped that, and I'm going to like just be a strong man. And honestly, a lot of it's just like, let yourself be who you already are. Like we have more sex now than we've ever had in our entire life. Like we have more fun now than our entire life, and mostly initiated not by me either. And I'm not throwing pity parties or manipulation or all those things that are really weak as a man.
Yep.
To do. And I think a lot of it has to do with this deal where I'm listening, and the trick on it with the guys though. This is the trick with guys. Like, you'll hear, and they'll start going through, and they'll start sharing, and they'll be like, "You gotta try it." But like, they'll share stuff, they'll share and then they start to get into the feelings. Most of the time, it's usually surface level, little stuff, and then it's like, then it starts to get into feelings and what, the secret things that are going on in her heart throughout the day, and then I'll hear it, like I don't know. I don't have a lot of language around validate. I'm like, okay, how do I how do I stamp that emotion for her? I don't know how I validate that. I'm like, and she's like, sometimes she'll be like, it's stupid, or it doesn't matter, or she'll dismiss it. I'd be like, no, you matter. Your feelings matter. How you feel matters. And if I tell her, if she says one thing that's wrong, and I'm like, friend, that's not true. I didn't think that. Immediately,
closed.
Immediately, what she hears is that her feelings aren't valid. I'm like, that's not what I said. That's not what. Of course, your feelings are valid. I'm telling you what you said is not true. And she's like, but for me, I thought she was trying to communicate like a man,
right?
And she's she's really communicating her emotion and how she feels. She's communicating her heart. Listen to her in an understanding way, right? So like I'll listen, and if I don't correct any single thing on there, I really hear her out. I wait till she's like got it out in her clothes. Dude, it's incredible.
David, you could save marriages with that right there, because what you said, really, it's valid, and we only
You
know
have
it.
a whole company and concept.
Well, we only know
waiting
it through
to happen.
experience. Like you're saying that, and we ran into a couple yesterday, and they were wearing these shirts that said 1 year anniversary. So we congratulated them. I'm like, like there's not too many things good about getting older, right? Our bodies deteriorate, and we get wrinkles, but there's one thing positive about getting older is that we can learn from experience, and the same goes for our marriage. The fact that you're saying those things, and I'm sitting over here on the other side of the table with you going, man, I mean, you're exactly right. Truer words never spoken. But what happens is we're having people come into these relationships, just like we have these kids. My daughter's at homeschool, and she's like, Dad, what is this, a parallelogram? And she's all frustrated. She goes, why do I have to learn this? And I thought to myself, I've never used a parallelogram in my life. And I did a little poll on my social media, and like 90% of the people never used a parallelogram. So like, who cares? Like, we're not teaching about the important things. We in a Greek church, the priest that married us was Greek. I mean, was married. The Greek priest was married. And we went into this premarital counseling, and it was interesting because he goes, have you guys had relations yet? And we're like, yeah, He's like, okay, I'd like you to stop. And he's like, I know you can't, you can't go back. You can't reclaim it. He goes, but there's a reason why I'd like you to stop. Because in your marriage, if you're going to have a long marriage, there will be times when sex will not be your saving grace. Their sex will not cure all. He goes, now
always be available.
And it won't always be available. He goes, now when you're young, and you're new, he goes, sex cures everything. And it was so true. And then he did us this thing where he had us come into this little back room, and he had her blindfolded. And he goes, now there's 25 little Post-its marked 1 through 25 all around this room. And there's, it's like there's all kinds of stuff in the room, tables and chairs. He goes,
what kind of priest is it?
It was, yeah. He goes, without touching her, he goes, I need you to guide her by your voice and tell her until she gets all 25 things. And at first we were like, what's going on? Like, this is kind of weird. But we did it. And what was the gist of that exercise?
I mean, it was just, even going back to the scripture, John 10:27, like my sheep hear my voice, it was really about hearing his voice and trusting him. So what his point was is sex is not always going to be available. If one person is sick or there's a baby or whatever, like sex is not always going to be available. And if it's not available, what's going to happen to your marriage? What's going to happen to your communication? What's going to happen to your intimacy? What's going to happen to the way that you guys connect? And so he taught us in a really small exercise like that, the importance of connection, the importance of voice, the importance of trust and direction. And so he had to guide me with his voice. Okay, Ange, about 2 steps from where you are right now, there's 2 steps down. Okay, so when you come to the edge here, you're going to take 1 step with your right foot, 1 step with your left foot. And now when you get to this point, at the bottom of this step, I'm going to have you take 3 more steps over here, and then you're going to bend down, you're going to kneel down. There's going to be another Post-it note right there. And so it was all about like just really honing in and listening to his voice and being aware of leadership. And male leadership, the importance of me trusting him, navigating through a minefield essentially, and to be able to pick up on these clues, to pick up on the gift, to pick up on the next thing that we needed to do together. And it just was such an important lesson, it was just because, and here's the thing, I'm an only child, and I'm an incredibly strong woman. Like I've always had to be. And I've always had my own career. I've always made 6 figures or more and multiple 6 figures. I've always, spoken to large groups. I've always led rooms. I've always gone after sort of the male, industry dominated field. Yeah. And went toe to toe from everything from my years of professional martial arts to where I am now. And it was just, I did it in operating rooms too. You know what I mean? It was like, didn't matter. I was just like, wherever I can have the biggest challenge. Yeah. So I needed somebody to put me into a softening. I need someone to put me in a place where I can feel those things and express those things and then listen. But I think what you're speaking of is so important because, love doesn't always feel, but it does. And so you not even bringing up what you're feeling about what she's saying shows what you're doing to love her, by listening. That's a do. It's not a feel, it's a do.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important for so many couples and marriages to understand that it's a doing. It's not always a feeling.
Well, to validate David, and to show some vulnerability, and to circle back to what we talked about earlier about going on cruise control, I'm going to validate exactly what you said and be vulnerable at the same time, because there have been plenty of times in the past couple of years even when I've gone on cruise control as a husband and I haven't paid attention to those things. You take it for granted, and then you get a really weird wake-up call. You're like, well, what if I'm not enough? Right? What if I'm not fulfilling her needs from a leadership standpoint? And then you tell yourself, I need to step up. Like I've gone into this lull. I've gotten comfortable, and we see this in culture. We see it even in sitcoms, like an Al Bundy syndrome, where Al Bundy's he's taken his wife for granted, and he's sitting there on the couch with his hand in his pants, and he's kind of given up on life. And we see it even now with the body types. As we're getting back into this. When you do jujitsu, or we're talking about, at one point in my life, my body was my image. Everything came through me. I got validated through my muscles, and then it became something else. But then I let that go, and I got on cruise control, and I started to think to myself, wait, I'm not leading her in the way I should. I'm not showing up for her with my body and my emotions and listening, because I was trying to interrupt and fix it. To what you said is, don't interrupt her. Don't try and fix it. She would even say, don't interrupt me. Don't tell me what you think I need. Just stop and just listen to me.
You don't even correct. Like, so if I come back to it later, cause it bugs a guy. Cause with a guy, they're like, these things aren't right. Like, if you think that I'm feeling that or thinking that, then like, you need to know that that's not what they don't. That's the craziest thing to me. It's like for a guy, it's like, how could you not want, like, if someone says something that's not correct,
right,
and you're like, hey, no, you're making an assumption there, or you took a left here when it should have been a right. Like, I want to know, because that fixes it for a guy that goes, oh, you didn't think that? I was in,
but that's not safe for her.
It doesn't fix it for a girl.
It's not safe.
That's
for a
not
woman,
what a girl's going. She's expressing emotion, and when you say safe, like, a guy thinks, like, what do you mean safe? Like, I'm not gonna beat you up. I'm not gonna
No, it's just there's a
imagine if
there.
every young man went through some type of just a day or two of hey, here's what to expect in your marriage. This will happen, or even in the 5th year, right, or the 10th year, and we do marriage counseling now, even in 12 years, and I'm looking at someone who's got 25 years in. Things are going to change. Like, nothing is constant. If we just assume, and that's why the whole cruise control metaphor applies to just about any area of your life, but especially in your marriage. If you try and put your marriage on cruise control, and you're not pouring into it, and you're not trying to adapt, and you're not trying to grow and realize that the woman she is now is going to be a different woman than she is in 10 years, and the man I am now is way different than when we first met, then you're just assuming that it's supposed to be easy, and that's why so many marriages are ending in divorce. Is because people think you don't have to work, and this is what you got. This is what you bought. Deal with it. It's not the case.
Yeah.
No, that's good. I mean, you can always ask that question too, because look, I think there's a lot of times, and this may or may not be true for you and Fran, but there'd be plenty of times when I would just love, to be able to sit down, have a conversation, and if you were to say to her, okay, at the end of when she's done, do you want me to listen, just listen, or do you want me to fix it? No. Because there's times when I do want you to fix it. There are times when it needs to be fixed. So I think there's a little bit of both there, but at the same time, you're really onto something in terms of the creating that covering. It's a covering.
You know what I do with that? So that's a common thing, right? To go, hey, do you want me to fix it? Or what guys will do though is they'll say, I'm not going to fix it, but I can't not let her know that these things she said were wrong, right? Like, she made these assumptions. Guys will say, I wasn't trying to fix it. I'm just telling you, I didn't think that, or I didn't feel. You said I felt like I didn't. Like, just don't care. Like, literally, when I say it, I'm like, there's that glow. That's my girl. Like, I say stuff like that. I'll say, you're a badass bitch. I'll say stuff like that. But, like, I'll literally, like, and I'll say it genuinely.
Yeah.
right? Because I love her being feminine. The feminine part is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? And she's a really strong girl, right?
Yeah.
And so for her to come out and feminine and like and really kind of like bask in it, like I need to be real just strong in it. And I need to be sure and certain.
Yeah.
And so I mean, you talk about like growth in that, man. When you practice it every single day, like man, I've grown. And now it's coming naturally for me now, not to correct, but even when I would autopilot any of it, if I wasn't turned on, I would, even after it, like she's good, she shared it all, and I'm like, well, there's a couple things, like, you want me to share any of that stuff? And she'll be like, I mean, you can if you want to. That means no. Yeah. Like, leave it, like, she's good. She doesn't care if it was true or not, right? And I'll be like, well, you said this and it wasn't true. And then it's like she's got all these other feelings because I just didn't validate any of it. And then I need to listen to it all. So I think of, like, it's almost too easy for really with guys. It's like you listen, get it out. Like, my goal in it is to really hear her and to get it out of her and to not say anything correcting, just really hear that she, knowing that what she's telling me is she feels this way.
So what's the biggest barricade to that? The biggest separation is when pride and stubbornness, because that's where a man will go to. I get very prideful. She's like, you can't even admit when you're wrong, or you're just stubborn, or you won't listen to me. And even with our children, years ago we were in Arizona, and I went to go get some acupuncture on my shoulder. And I walk in, and I'm in guy mode. I'm like, fix it, Yeah. And the guy who was like, hold on a second. He's like, let's talk for a second. And I'm like, I'm here to get my shoulder fixed. What do you want to talk about? He's like, well, how was your day? And immediately I'm like, what do you mean, how was my day? He's like, yeah. I go, I don't know. It's not great. He goes, why? I go, well, I yelled at my daughter really bad last night, and I feel guilty about it today. He's like, well, why did you yell at her? And remember, in the back of my head, I'm like, I thought we're supposed to be putting needles in my shoulder, but I'm like, I'm going along with this. And he goes, why'd you yell at her? I go, because it was her bedtime. And she was looking at some little magnifying glass trying to figure out how it worked. And I told her 3 times, and she still didn't go to bed, and I really laid into her, and she cried. And now I'm feeling guilty about that today. He goes, wow.
Those are the worst.
He goes like this. He goes, wow. He goes, she was really into that magnifying glass, huh? I go, yeah. He goes, isn't it amazing how children are so present in something so simple? He goes, what if we were adults could be that present with what we were doing?
Who is this guy?
Yeah.
Who's his acupuncture?
Yeah. and automatically, again, it was one of those heart-piercing moments where I was like, you got me. He's like, she was like so Tom present.
Hanks.
He goes, children are presence machines. He goes, you're worried about her getting enough sleep because you're an adult. You're worried, well, what do you got to do the next day? How are you going to get enough sleep? What if you're tired? What if you don't get your coffee in the morning? She's fascinated with what's in front of her in the moment. And he goes, that's what you can learn from your child. And it's kind of what you can learn from you talking about your wife. If we can just be present and not worry about fixing it, and not worry about how it's going to end up, not worry if we're going to have sex that night, not worrying if it's going to end up in an argument, and not worrying about anything else except being present. And he called it being a present machine. And I tell you what, for a type A squirrel, short attention span person like me, it's a real struggle. And it's like that addiction. I'm never going to break that. I'm always going to be like quick to judge, quick to jump in, and short attention span. But every once in a while, I can remind myself, be present. And just like with my daughters the other day, they're doing something and I'm working, and she's like, just come in and be present. And I'm like, but this. And she's like, but nothing. But nothing. Be present, because they're going to grow up like that and you're going to regret it.
Drops the mic.
That's so true.
We need to wrap up. Thank you, guys. This is awesome. This was really awesome.
Oh, this was an honor.
I feel like this could be like a bunch of episodes.
Yeah.
And also, I'd like to have Fran.
Yeah,
that'd be
I
really
would
cool.
love to have Fran.
For
yeah.
sure.
Maybe we'll do it in Gatlinburg.
Yeah, we gotta bring. We didn't bring our equipment.
We almost brought our podcast.
We almost
equipment.
did. Yeah.
Sometimes we bring it on the road.
Depending on, we just canned a couple before. We canned some in the studio, and then we canned a couple. You canned one before we left.
You guys are like doing it in bathrooms and
Yes.
anywhere you
Closets. Yep. Wherever.
It's a commitment.
I'm your baby.
Well, thank you for having us on.
Thank
we really
you. This was
appreciate
awesome. We're excited for you.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are so comfortable behind the mics. I'm like,
Yeah.
still trying to work.
Well,
it out.
you know what? We got our groove on there. There was a time where I'm like, because I know that you haven't launched this yet. And there was a time like Dave's in the zone right now. Like you're going off. You're in the zone. So that was good.
Oh,
You'll hit your sweet spot.
I love this. Okay, thank you guys.